We are so thrilled to be partnering with Hinge. Hinge is the dating app designed to be deleted. As you all know, I'm a huge Hinge advocate as I met my partner of almost 3 years on the app. Even before meeting him, Hinge was always my go-to app because I met more relationship-minded people here and had some great dates. Clearly, I haven't been on the app for a little while, but I re-downloaded it to check out some of the new features. One that stood out to me was the voice prompt, my best friend's take on why you should date me, where your friend can hype you up. Not only does this make the profile creation less daunting, but it's not always easy to see your own green flags. So to test it out, I asked Yue some fun prompts to get her take on what I could put if I was dating again. So the first one, how long have we known each other? What was your first impression of me and how has that changed?
Julie and I have known each other for almost 10 years. My first impression of Julie was that she's very social, but I've learned that she has a lot more depth to her beyond the social butterfly that she is.
My next prompt, what do you think are my green flags?
I would say she's deeply loyal. She believes in love, curious mindset, and she is fearlessly ambitious.
And then last but not least, what kind of friend am I?
Julie is the kind of friend who will always have your back, no matter what.
Damn, that feels nice to hear. So download Hinge and try voice prompts today. Then find someone worth deleting the app for.
Hi, I'm Yue Xu.
And I'm Julie Kraftchick.
We're active daters turned dating sociologists.
Here to dive into everything modern dating and relationships.
Welcome to the DATEABLE podcast. Dateables, welcome back to season 18 here. We're just getting started. And already we're getting such great feedback on this new season. We're coming in hot because 18 is such a big year in anybody's life. When you turn 18, you're like officially an adult. You can vote, you can do all these things. So we feel like as a podcast, we've also matured to earn the right of an 18-year-old.
Yeah, and we had to have the last 17 seasons to get us to where we are today. And it's like when you turn 18, you need the learnings and the experiences and the trials and tribulations and all the stuff that you learned from to get you to that next stage of life.
Not to get too deep about this 18 thing, but if you think about the course of life, sometimes when you're younger, you're like, I just want to skip ahead. I want to know everything already, or I don't want to make the same mistakes as my parents or my predecessors. But if you really think about the course of like your childhood, you have to make all those mistakes and go through all of those experiences to live the life that you want later in life. So even in the beginning, the last 17 seasons of Dateable, we've learned a lot and we put them all into practice. So this season, we are putting them into practice, but asking bigger questions. Let's go big and let's go deep.
Yeah, this was one of the things that we talked about at our Joshua Tree retreat of just like, what makes Dateable different? What is it that, we're trying to do here ultimately? And it is to debunk a lot of the myths, which is perfectly in line with our episode today, but to really understand like, why are we dating the way we do? And how much of that comes from how we think we should be dating versus what we actually want to be doing? And what's actually even accurate? Like, where is this stuff coming from? So much of it's like been fed to us by society. And, we're going into it today with F the Fairy Tale. We have the great Damona Hoffman as our guest. And it's like, even the rom-coms, the fairy tales, the Disney movies, all of this has really seeped into our definition of love and dating and how things work, relationships. And, where is all of this coming from and how much does it actually matter?
Last week's episode, we talked about how you really don't need to be good at dating in order to be in a healthy relationship. And on this episode, we're really asking the question of, are we expecting too much of dating, or do we have unrealistic expectations of love? And that's why we keep chasing this unrealistic idea of what a relationship should look like. That's why we're all a little fucked.
I mean, I absolutely think we have unrealistic expectations of love. And I think a lot of it does come from, the fairy tale, like we talk about in this episode, F the Fairy Tale. But this notion of happily ever after, like, I think that really did mess us up because we feel like we have to date in order to get there and to find this like person that we believe is going to save us, which ultimately isn't what dating is about and what relationships are about either.
That's one of the major traps. Right? We think someone will complete us, save us, make us happier, make us better. It's the trap that so many of us fall for. And then we wake up in a relationship asking, do I even like
Yeah.
this person? Is this relationship even good for me? Julie, have you been following the whole Who the Fuck Did I Marry on TikTok?
No, please fill me in.
She's gone viral. This woman on TikTok is doing this like really long rant basically about her ex-husband who she married in 2020. She had only known him for like a week or two before they decided to move in together, all because he sold her on this idea. Well, first of all, on their first date, he helped her change her tire. So she was like, oh, I'm a damsel in distress, and he helped me. And then he started paying for her bills because he moved in during the pandemic. And she's like, ooh, I don't have to worry about finances. And then he was buying a house for them. So, and then she got pregnant, all in the course of like 3 or 4 months or something like that. But I'm not done yet because it's a really long story, but I just got to that part and I already thought, holy cow, not once did she stop to ask, do I even like this person? Do I want to be with this person? It's because he did all the fairy tale like gestures and she thought this has got to be the guy. You know, on their first date, he held her hand as they walked into the restaurant and she was like, ooh. I mean, think about it. A stranger holding your hand walking into a restaurant, maybe a huge red flag. But to her, she's like, oh, I'm getting saved. This is my Prince Charming.
So with TikTok, you know how like people, because they're only like what, a minute or so long, that people have like part 1, part 2. How many parts is this one? Like 20?
Like 1,000. They're rants, and she does them in her car as she's driving. It's insane, Julie. But I'm not even done. And my friend's like, you got to listen to it like double time. Sorry, I'm gonna look it up. How many parts are to Who the Fuck Did I Marry? And I would love to know if anybody listening to this has finished the entire series.
I need to go look for it now.
Hold on. It's still scrolling. Part 52
oh my God.
videos.
It is crazy though, thinking about it. You know, someone doing like the chivalrous acts and like the big gestures. And that's what, you know, love is all about. And I feel like I've had this like revelation with my current relationship because I don't think my relationship has really had any of these moments. It's been a very like equal relationship. You know, I feel like it's different than what I thought a relationship would be. Like, I think because I thought like this person would save me, even though I really didn't need to be saved.
No.
You know, like, and do these like sweeping gestures and all the stuff. And I'm like, I don't actually need that. Like, I just need someone who's going to be there with me and to be like, you know, my best friend that you have sexual attraction with. So I feel like it's kind of reframed, but in a good way and like the best way possible. Cause I think before I was always like trying to fit this role. Like I'm acting like the girlfriend.
Yes.
I don't know if this is making sense, but in my mind, it's just like, I don't have that feeling anymore. It just feels so much more natural and comfortable. And I really think that's actually the best fairy tale because that's the happily ever after when you just feel good, right?
Yeah. And then we'll get into this discussion like at a later time because we were just saying this before we recorded. What is a happily ever after in a relationship? If it's not the fairy tale, what is it? And I think that's the problem we're facing right now. It's the fairy tale it's the only thing we know about how a relationship happily ever after ends. But what is that? If we were to rewrite that, what does that story look like?
Yeah. I feel like I found myself even doing this sometimes like, oh, like I want this big grand gesture because that's what like I've seen and heard. And that's what you've been told all this time, like happens when you meet the one. But then I'm like, do I really want this? Like, no, like I'm okay. Like just, you know, this is actually good for me to have like a life that I'm just myself and happy with. So it is like this conscious untangling of it a bit.
Yeah, I still remember the guy I dated in Beijing on our first date. He's like, I really want to take you to the most romantic place in China, and flew us that day, like booked a flight 2 hours later, flew us to Hangzhou, and we like rented a canoe and went on this beautiful lake and then had this wonderful day, first date day in this other city. and then he ends up trying to find hookers on a dating app. I mean, like, which would I rather have? Would I rather have someone who gives me such big gestures, but also does it for other people? Or would I rather have someone who's just like, yeah, like a partner who's just
Right.
doing life with me and creating life with me? Yeah, of course I'd rather have the latter.
I mean, all to the people that have found that person that does the big grand gestures and
Yes.
gives them that partnership. But I feel like from the stories we've heard, I can't really think of any examples of someone that does both, like checks the boxes in both ways. It tends to be what you described, like it fizzles out after a bit because it is it's almost like this act. It's not actually like a genuine connection.
And I do wonder then, where does the romance play into all of this? Because I can tell you that the most equal partnerships I've seen are with my parents' friends. Those couples are very equal partners. They're doing life together. They have each other's back. But I always hear them complain there is no romance because when you're so equal in a partnership, you think very logically about romance and you become very practical.
I can see that.
So there's also a balance. It's like the fairy tale is rewritten, but we still have to inject some of that into our love lives.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. And I agree it can be easy to slide into that, but it does take that balance because balance ultimately is everything. Easier said than done. But yeah, like it's still a romantic relationship. You still want to feel desired and, you still want, I'm not saying like you don't ever want to get like gestures from your partner. Of course you do.
Yeah, right.
It's more just like it can't all rest on that. And that's what we've been told is it like all is because of like, the passion, the excitement, the grand gestures, like that's what a relationship is. And it's a lot more than just that too.
I'll give you a good example because my mom's friend just told her this story. For Valentine's Day, her husband of 30 plus years bought her flowers. It was a big deal. It's a big gesture. The flowers were $70 and he brought them home and he proceeded to tell her a story of how there were $40 flowers, but they didn't have a vase. And he felt like for $30 more, it was worth it to get more flowers with a vase. And that's why he chose to spend $70 versus $40. And it's like kind of sweet in a way. It's like, oh, well, he thought about her. This is a really nice gesture. But on the other hand, she's like, why did he have to tell me and justify the spending?
But on the flip side of it, when you are like a couple that has merged all your finances, like it does become more than just like the sexy, fun stuff. So that's why I think relationships are so hard because we are trying to straddle both. We're trying to have this stable life partner, but we also need some romance and some excitement, or it just becomes very dry and platonic and, problematic too.
Yeah.
Like if all you're doing is, just doing the day to day and there's nothing exciting that comes in.
I know.
But the fairy tale's like too far extreme too, right? The whisking off your feet, like that's just not realistic.
No. That's called kidnapping.
But I think that's the problem though with the fairy tale mindset. Like I'll speak from experience. Like for years, I thought dating would just be super exciting. And then if I didn't feel that with someone, I wasn't interested or I thought it wasn't the right chemistry. We hear this all the time. Like there's no chemistry. It's boring. But like healthy relationships for the most part are actually quite boring. I know again, it has to have a little bit of that pizzazz, but day to day, like there isn't that drama and passion going on all the time. You are living your life and coexisting a big part of it.
And maybe that's the takeaway is if you're looking for excitement and fairy tale, just stick to dating. Just date. And if you're looking for dating to be in a relationship, you have to let go some of that and have more realistic expectations for what a healthy relationship is.
Do you think there's a world where you could have like the love and passion and throwdown and then also that stability?
I think it ebbs and flows. It does come and go. And like you said, there is a balance. And if you lose one or the other, you have to find ways to bring it back. It takes constant work. But I would say that is a choice from both parties in the relationship. And the minute one person decides not to choose that, then you're done. It's a constant daily choice. That's why relationships are really hard. It's work.
They are. We've talked about this. It's like, it's not hard that you're with someone where it's like an uphill battle for
Right.
them to commit. That's
Right.
a different hard, but it's a hard of like, you need to give it thought. Like
Yes.
you give your job thought, or you give working out or your health thought. Like this is another area that requires you to be conscious about it.
Yes.
And to monitor it and to make changes accordingly.
Listen, if I wanted to experience the best, I don't know, romantic love life, I seriously would just serial date and just be courted. Because you don't have to talk about bills. You don't have to talk about who's calling the plumber or the electrician. You just talk about fun shit, and then you get courted and you get treated. Sure, if that's all I wanted, that's all I do. I don't need to do that with one person. But that's not, I think, for most people who date, that's not really it, right? You still want the Sunday test. You want someone to be with you, just chilling with you on a Sunday on your couch.
Doing nothing.
Doing
Boring.
nothing.
Yeah.
And they don't need to court you in that moment. So we really got to step back and think, what is it that I actually want when I'm dating?
We want it all. That's what it is.
Well, sorry, Buster, you can't have it all.
That's the problem, right? It's like then you complain it's, unfulfilling and lonely when you're only going on like first dates and in the courting phase.
Absolutely. Or you could be in a relationship where your partner constantly courts you but isn't emotionally there for you. That's also very lonely too.
Yes. Well, if you do want that committed relationship, we're excited to dive into this episode where Damona goes through all the myths of what's getting in our way of finding it.
Yes.
Like the, this feeling of relationships are supposed to be a certain way.
Right.
Okay. Well, so much to unpack here. But before we do, announcements at DATEABLE Podcast. That's us on all the socials. Instagram is probably our most active, along with Big Dateable Energy, BDE, our newly named Facebook group. You might notice us running some polls. We're trying to better understand everyone in the audience and, gear up for this continued season 18 and make sure that we're bringing the best content, the most relevant content. So if you also have ideas, feel free to shoot us an email, hello@dateablepodcast.com, and you can give any topic ideas. Also, if you have a brunch talk question, we are back swinging full time with brunch talk, all new ones. Feel free to leave them in the reviews. That's where we bump them up to the top. Or again, you can also email and just let us know you left a 5-star review if you're uncomfortable putting it in the body of the review, or you're on Spotify where there are no reviews. But we are getting close again to the 1K. So keep the reviews coming, keep the brunch talk questions coming, and we're excited for this season. Okay, well, before we dive into it, let's hear a message from our sponsors.
This episode is sponsored by Via. We all know there are things that can help set the mood in the bedroom, but did you know a little THC could also do that? Yes, Via has developed a unique blend of pleasure-enhancing cannabinoids, libido-strengthening herbs, and a low dose of THC all into one mind-blowing gummy called High Love. This gummy, wow, it will awaken your senses, increase blood flow, and intensify any sexual experience. I've been pleasantly surprised by the High Love gummies because it is just the right amount of THC for me to have a good time without feeling sleepy. And hey, if THC is not your thing, Via also offers a wide array of other gummies without it. And everything legally ships in 50 states with discreet packaging directly to your door. So if you're over 21, you can get 15% off and a free pack of award-winning Dreams THC plus CBN sleep gummies with our exclusive code DATEABLE at viahemp.com. That's VIIAHEMP.com. Let the gummies work their magic. Head to viahemp.com and use the code DATEABLE to receive 15% off and one free sample of their Sleepy Dream gummies. That's viahemp.com and use the code DATEABLE at checkout. Take your passion and pleasure to a whole new level with High Love from Via Hemp.
As you know, I recently left my corporate job and I've been in total recovery mode, all about self-care. One of my new routines is the nighttime shower before bed. There's just something about washing away the day and that reflection that's been super helpful for me. I've been using one of our partners, Osea's Mega Moisture Duo. This combo body oil and body lotion are so freaking incredible. It literally feels like I'm at a spa. I realized that the secret is seaweed and other skin level ingredients that are normally reserved for face products. And that's why I was so excited when Osea became one of our partners. And, we're so grateful for partners like this because one, they keep the show going, but they're also super good for all of our listeners and for our own well-being. So if you want to have that nighttime bliss like I am doing, you can get 10% off your first order site-wide with code DATEABLE at oseamalibu.com. You'll get free samples with every order and free shipping on orders over $60. So head to oseamalibu.com and use the code DATEABLE for 10% off. Let us know which products you end up going with. Share them in social. Super excited to see what you end up choosing.
This episode is made possible by Badlands Pets. As you all know, Mojo, my precious baby, is the reason why I found love in the first place. He made me feel love again. So I would do anything to ensure his health and longevity. And actress Katherine Heigl and I have that in common. She's helped save over 16,000 dogs through her foundation. And after doing a ton of research, she feels there's one place we can look to improve any dog's health, and that's their food. So fortunately, she found that just by adding a few special superfoods to her dog's food, she saw huge transformations in their health. So she's made a 20-minute video explaining step by step how anyone can do the same thing to see incredible changes in their dog's health. I've definitely re-looked at what I'm feeding Mojo and making sure that, hey, he only has one life to live, and I want to make sure it's the best damn life. So if you want to keep your dog healthy and happy, go to badlandsfood.com/dateable and watch Catherine's video right now. Again, that's badlandsfood.com/dateable.
If you've been listening to the pod, you know I'm marking my calendar for the big sale from Last Bottle Wines, one of our wonderful sponsors. If you don't already know, they're a Napa-based online wine shop that offers 30 to 70% off retail. And the best part, there's no subscriptions, no fees, and no minimum purchase, just a daily email with really great wine. And as I mentioned, they're having a massive sale. Their marathon sale is coming up on March 28th and 29th. They flip that one wine per day rule on its head and instead offer back-to-back, two-back deals. That means wines are only up on the site for a couple minutes at a time. We got a preview order with the mini marathon package of some of their favorites, and I'm telling you, it's a sale you want to get in on. And the best part is we're offering Dateable listeners 10% off your first order with code DATEABLE. Sign up at lastbottlewines.com and use the code DATEABLE and find out why Last Bottle is the most fun way to discover and buy amazing wine. Okay, let's hear it from Damona.
Is there such a thing as the fairy tale or the happily ever after? Damona, judging by the name of your recent book, F the fairy tale, I'm going to guess you're going to say no. But welcome to our show. We've been trying to get you on our show for a long time. Like, long time, I mean years. So it's such an honor to have you on our show finally. Who is Damona Hoffman? She lives in LA, but also works in New York as she goes back and forth. Originally from Michigan, she is married. She's a celebrity dating coach and the official love expert of the Drew Barrymore Show. She's the host of the Dates and Mates podcast and author of the book that I was just referring to, F the Fairy Tale, Rewriting the Dating Myths and Live Your Own Love Story.
Welcome. We're so excited to have you, Damona.
I'm so excited to be here. I mean, I feel like I know y'all already. I was like, really? We haven't met? Because I've been following you on social media for so
Same.
long and listening to this podcast. So
We know you.
I must have dreamed it. I think I dreamed that it happened.
It's okay. Our fantasy is happening. We're getting into reality right now.
We manifested this.
Yes, collectively.
You know, trying to answer the bigger question of, does the fairy tale exist? In your opinion, what is the fairy tale?
That's a good question because the fairy tale is different for every person. But the fairy tale is any story you're telling yourself that is actually keeping you from having the relationship that you want. And sometimes those fairy tales get planted by our family of origin, by society, by actual fairy tales and rom-coms and all the things that we see and hear and consume, social media, all of it. I just think it's time that we take stock of what those inputs are and really ask ourselves the question, is this the relationship dream that I want? And if not, what do we need to change? Whether you're dating, single, or you're in a relationship right now, what needs to shift to really align with my future and the modern concept of what love and relationships is?
I mean, you talk to so many people as a dating coach. What are some examples of some of the fairy tales you've heard along the way?
When I was writing this book, I was like, there's a lot of these stories, these fairy tales, these myths that are keeping people stuck from finding what they want in love.
Okay.
So what I did, I look at dating really as a continuum. And I look at all of the different phases of dating when someone comes to me for help in love. And I'm like, okay, if your love life isn't flowing, somewhere in this funnel of love, you're stuck and things aren't moving forward. So I looked at the 4 major phases of falling in love, finding your person, and saw that there was a myth that really governed each of those 4 phases. So the first phase being the mindset phase. Before you even step out to date, what are you looking for? And you can waste a lot of time. I know you've talked about this. You can waste a lot of time when you're dating without purpose, without intention, or without a clear idea of what you're looking for. And by the same token, you also can talk yourself into or out of something great or something terrible, just based on the stories that you're telling yourself. So that's where I really started with the first myth. And this is the list myth.
Okay.
When I say, what are you looking for? And people say, I don't know, I'll know it when I see it. Will you? Have you? Did you? They hand me a list that is either a mile long and not realistic, or it's a carbon copy of everybody else's list. And that's where those lingering stories come into play.
The list. I feel like that's something we see all the time. And we like to call it the settling paradox, that like people, you know, want that person that's like 6 feet, but they don't actually think about the qualities that matter for the long haul. Like,
how they're being treated.
They'll settle for like being in a situationship as long as the person's like good on paper. How do they think this is getting them to the fairy tale, but it actually gets in their own way?
The list is so theoretical too. You know, how many times have you been like, yeah, this is my ideal, right? And then you meet someone in person and you're like, not at all matching any of those things, not 6 feet, not making $250,000 a year, not driving a Benz or whatever it is. I know that's not on your list.
How do you know?
Yet you start to then rewrite the story and you're like, oh, but we had chemistry. That's another myth we'll talk about later. But, and we make the story fit. Sometimes when people hear about the list myth, initially they think, oh, so Damona's saying don't have a list, don't have any criteria that you are dating based on. No, that's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying question everything. Question what you put down on this list. If you put 6 feet, the question is why? What does 6 feet mean to you? Because ultimately, it is kind of arbitrary, right? And who decided it was 6 feet? Like my husband is 5'10" and a half. He's plenty tall. I'm 5 feet. He still looks like a giant next to me. But I'm like, you would not be on the list of so many women. And you're such a great husband. But somebody else said 6 feet, tall, dark, and handsome. And so we were like, okay, that's what we want. And if we unpack it, what does it actually mean? Well, I want to feel safe. I want to feel taken care of. And that's kind of the twist. And what I talk about in After the Fairy Tale, how do we get underneath that and really get to the core goal of what we need? And also, what will it feel like when we are with that person? Because you will notice the feeling being repeated. You may not notice what that person's physical qualities look like when you see them.
Well, that's such a profound distinction because we walk around with a list because we think we have agency over our own love lives. We think we are the ones choosing, so we're going to make this list because these are my choices. Most of the time, we're walking around with someone else's list.
Right.
That list is not something we created. We just regurgitated what society, what rom-coms, what your relatives have told you should go on your list. And the twist that you're giving is, how do you turn that
that list into something that's actually yours, personalized for you, and giving you more of that agency over your love life.
So I have a question for you, Damona. Like, how does the list tie back to this, like, happily ever after? Is it that, like, people think that in order to, like, have the love life I have always wanted, I must meet every criteria on my list? Or like you were saying, tall, dark, and handsome, we've been fed that that's the prince that comes for you. Like, what is that connection?
Well, when I was identifying the myths, I was like, I can't leave everybody hanging. I have to give them, what is the antidote to the myth? And I identified, actually, I've been talking about these 4 pillars of long-term compatibility for years and years and years in my practice as the elements that I saw consistently show up as the building blocks of a successful long-term relationship. And it's interesting, there are 4 myths and there are 4 pillars. So the antidote to the list myth is starting with shared relationship goals. And it sounds so simple. It sounds so simple. And yet,
so hard.
This is how we end up in situationships.
Yes.
When we heard the person say, well, they weren't necessarily looking for a relationship. They were just online to see what was out there. And like, maybe they just got out of a breakup, or I don't know, maybe they don't want to have kids and you want to have kids, but something sparks. And then you end up on this path that is not where you wanted to be and not with the person that you wanted to be with because we were going based on the wrong criteria.
What other myths are there? We did one.
So the second myth is the rules myth. I think you two will like this one.
Oh,
we feel this one already.
We love talking about how the rules fucked us all. That's one of our favorite topics.
Oh, yeah. So the rules, and I expand that. I do specifically talk about the rules, which never resonated for me as a feminist and also as a feminist dating coach. I was just like, wait. So I'm just going to sit here and like, I got to get the ring and I'm going to sit here and let my life just happen to me. No. Like, I am in the driver's seat of my life, regardless of my gender.
Yes.
So if you have differing views, if you're listening, take everything I say with a grain of salt. But that is the lens that I look through. But I find that as we're looking at reevaluating and rewriting these rules, we have to examine those beliefs about gender, even how that has dictated our lives for so long. And when you even just think about the possibilities for women 20 years ago, 50 years ago,
right,
we didn't have this much choice in dating. We didn't have financial agency. We didn't have career upward mobility. We didn't have educational opportunities the way that we do now. And women are out earning men in college degrees and advanced degrees. So let's just acknowledge you can't change one part of the equation and expect the rest of the calculation to remain the same.
Right.
All the time, people are like, oh, Damona, like I get questions on dates and mates all the time. Wait, can women send the first message?
Oh my God, I know. We do too. And we're like,
Same.
it's 2024 and we're still asking this.
Yes.
But it goes back to like this trying to be saved mentality, which I think goes into the fairy tale. It's like women have been taught that we lean back and we just wait. We're sitting ducks. We wait because that's what we've been told. But you're saying like that's actually not the approach to finding the love life you want at all.
Not at all. Not at all for the modern world. And of course, there's a difference between like chasing someone and, you know, it's still a dance. But that whole idea of like, these are the set of rules that I have to play by because somebody else said that that was true, or maybe that was true for my parents or for my grandparents, but it's not true today if you don't want it to be true. It's not just the rules. It's the game. It's The Bachelor. It's the fairy tales. It's all of these stories that tell us that dating is a game to be won. And if you just play the game right, you get the ring. Well, look. That is also not a goalpost.
No.
The ring is where the beginning of the next cycle and relationship escalator begins. So let's stop treating that like that's the end goal and the happily ever after for the princess.
Well, that's where the rom-com ends, right? Is when you get the ring. And we all know that that's not where your love story ends at all.
And you earn the ring. That's, you know, it's like, this is such an achievement. Tying this back to the fairy tale is traditionally for women, we think we wait for our fairy tale to happen. We don't make it happen.
Yeah.
Waiting for the prince, waiting for the ring, waiting for that happily ever after. And that's all changing, especially as we look at this whole like, you got to lean in and we got to take charge of our lives and our careers. So I feel like there is change made in terms of that gender role. But do you see any changes happening with men?
Oh gosh, seriously, a lot. And I think as women, we sort of underestimate the amount of change that's happening with men. Let's just shine a light on Me Too.
Right.
That has really changed the dating game. Ultimately, I think for the better, but it's left a lot of men like, I don't know, like, wait,
what?
am I creepy if I talk to her in person? Like,
Yeah, I don't know what to do.
I could be a harasser now. Yeah.
But ultimately, I think it's better because one, we have agency again. Like, you're not going to pull that crap with me.
Right.
That is no longer acceptable. And it allows us to communicate about what's going on. It gives us more control over what's happening. And that's the thing. I just want us to be empowered, like you were saying, to sort of take control of our dating destiny, not to sit back and wait like the princess in the tower.
Yeah.
And I just have to acknowledge, I'm sure you hear this a lot from your listeners and from clients that you work with. And there's this fatigue that's going on.
Yes.
It keeps getting worse every year, it seems.
There was a brief respite during the first year of COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A
I was
newfound
like,
hope.
phew, I don't have to talk about dating burnout anymore.
Yeah.
But like sometimes when I talk about this agency, this taking control of your dating destiny, I get back like, oh, that sounds like a lot of work, Damona. I work so hard during the day. I don't want to also have to work this hard in my love life. I want to know what you both say to that? Because I get that question on Dates and Mates all the time.
Interesting. I mean, I know like for myself, I used to be the rules follower, but to a T. I would just be sitting there waiting for things to happen. And I would argue that it might actually be less work if you take control of it because you are now just getting the answer, whatever that is. Like I remember wasting hours sitting, watching my phone, waiting for it to light up instead of just texting the person, right? So it's making these shifts. Like it's not about work. It's more about just being authentic. I think I realized too, like I wasn't playing these types of games in any other part of life. Like I was a go-getter in my career with friends. I would just reach out when I wanted to. And ultimately I wanted a partner where I could reach out when I wanted to. So like, why do this when you're dating? So it's unraveling some of these old stereotypes of like the woman sits and does nothing and the man chases her and goes after it. So I can see how someone might say, oh, now I'm the one that needs to send the messages. But I think if you look at like the time spent, you actually will be doing less work. And it's really just recognizing that like that way isn't right. F the fairy tale, as you say. It's more about like, how do I just like have an authentic connection with another human being?
I'm just going to say something really controversial. I think people are fucking lazy. I think that's the problem. I think it's like daters spend more time complaining about dating than they do about how do I better my dating life? How do I enjoy it more? The same complaints they have about the other person, they're also doing it themselves because they're lazy. You know, like I hate getting ghosted on, but then they ghost someone because it's the path of least resistance. So I think where daters need to think about is like, if I want this better result in my love life, then I need to be that better person myself. And that will take work. But the benefits of that work, it's going to lead you to love.
I love that you are taking the unpopular opinion because I think some people probably need to hear that. How much energy are you putting into the wrong things?
Right.
Like you were just saying too, Julie. Like
yes.
When you really do an energetic audit of like how many people are living rent free in your head and checking their phone and also not saying the thing because we get so afraid of being rejected, of not having our expectations met, which is totally natural. But we have to just examine the cost of that to ourselves of not saying the thing and not getting the answer and then staying in limbo.
Because it's work either way. It's just it's like passive versus active work. And like, what do you want to do?
Ooh, that was spicy. I like that.
Well, let's get spicier. What's your next myth?
Okay. Also unpopular opinion, chemistry.
Oh, yep. We hear this one a lot.
Let me clarify for the folks that are like, what? Is this lady a cynic? Does she hate love? No, I love love. I'm just realistic about, I've worked with thousands of people over the last 17 plus years. Chemistry does not equate to long-term compatibility.
Yeah.
No.
So what I tell my clients is be led by curiosity in those first 3 dates. If you're curious about the other person, then that's an endless well. That's how you get to 16 years of marriage like I've had. because I'm still curious about what my husband thinks. I'm still curious about the way that he looks at the world. I'm just curious. And yes, the chemistry develops. Okay, yes. I mean, he was adorable, like when I first met him. It's not like you go to a first date and you're like, ew.
Right.
Right. You're not repulsed.
Well, Damona said chemistry is not
Push
the thing.
through.
No, you have to have an attraction. You have to have some
Yes.
attraction.
Right.
I'm talking about that like weak in the knees. I can't breathe. I can't think. I can't
Yes.
go
The
on.
spark.
Chemistry, like
Yeah.
the spark. I knew the first time I saw them.
It's called tequila.
Yeah.
It's called tequila, honey.
Exactly.
And we retroactively tell the story. Again, we're telling the story. Inevitably, as soon as I say chemistry is a myth, somebody will say, but my parents,
Yeah.
the first time
Yeah.
I met
Oh
my
my
best
gosh.
friend was there. Like
Yeah.
literally every time I post about it on Instagram, literally the next comment is, but I met my husband and I knew. Okay. But there were so many other times, and I talk about it in F the Fairy Tale, a story of a time when I thought it was the one and I felt the chemistry and I was
Yes,
like
for
mad
sure.
out of my mind. And then it was like, didn't hear from my guy.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
We omit that story when we're telling the happily ever after.
Correct.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we agree with you on this. I think it's not to say like if you have zero attraction or you think this person is super freaking boring, like we're not saying go on another date with them. But especially in the world of dating apps where, you know, there's so much pressure to like have to know right away. And that's just not how it is like in the past. Even like when your parents met, like they probably didn't need to make that call immediately. It was like more natural and organic as you kept going.
Can I ask you a follow-up question on that? Because
Yeah.
when you say there's so much pressure to know immediately on dating apps, do you mean in the swipe or do you mean when you have that first date and you're deciding, do I see them again?
When you have that first date.
Hmm.
I mean, there are people too that put pressure on like, I need to only match with people that I can like envision a future with. We see that also.
So crazy.
But I think the biggest thing too is like when you go to the date, it's kind of like when you go to a singles party, right? Because you're in this vibe of like, this is a date. This is something. I need to decide if this is going to be the person. Where in other parts of life, like when you were in like college, you just like organically met people and it developed over time. And that's so missing today. We have this saying like, if it's a maybe, it's a yes. And just like, it's kind of similar to what you're saying with chase the curiosity. If it's a hard no, then yeah, save both of your time. But if you're at least intrigued by the person, you never know. The third date, I love the third date rule that you have. It's like, who knows? By then you might be feeling that chemistry.
I agree with you. And I wonder if how much of that feeling of time pressure and like needing to make a decision is really self-imposed and how much of it is like,
Oh, yeah.
if you don't state your business from the beginning. I have different feelings about this whole paradox of choice of like, now there's so many
Yeah.
dating options available, which is true. Over the years that I've been coaching,
Mhm.
the speed of dating, the volume of dating, way up. So
Yeah.
I see that as good that we have more options. I don't really see this paradox of choice of like, well, now there's so many options, no one will settle down.
Yeah.
But I can see that it maybe shows up if you're not clear on the first couple dates that maybe things won't develop further.
I think the biggest paradox is why are there so many options yet no one can find anyone? That's the biggest paradox to me.
Right?
But I do think it's
So crazy.
self-imposed. I think there's this feeling of like,
Yeah.
I only have so much time. And if I'm not super into this person on date one, then I don't want to waste my time further. And I want to see who else is out there.
Oh.
I think that's where it's coming from.
Yeah, that wasted time thing. Whew.
I'm taking tennis lessons lately. And what I'm learning from tennis is such a parallel to dating. In tennis, when you hit the ball, like my coach is always like, keep your eye on the ball, make sure the racket contacts the ball before you see where it lands. And that's exactly how people look at dating, is that they don't actually watch the ball hit the racket. They look at where it lands before they even hit the ball. And I feel like daters go into dating thinking this way. They get ahead of themselves. They already made up a story of how this date will go, who this person is, before even focusing on the actual connection. And that's where this chemistry myth comes in for me, Damona, is that sometimes we put so much emphasis on chemistry, but chemistry can't be the only thing.
Right.
There has to be all this other stuff that makes someone a great partner. I had great chemistry with a guy who was basically homeless. Could I have had a long-term relationship with this guy? No. But we had great chemistry. We can't just rely only on the chemistry, but we really have to focus on the contact part, like connecting with someone. Ask asking not where this is going, but like, do I feel connected to this person?
First of all, I freaking love an analogy. And like, even though I don't play sports, I use sports analogies all the time. And I'm like, I don't actually understand this game.
Like,
but
it sounds
sports
good.
ball.
Yeah.
And I will add, in the book, I talk about how there's so much anxiety around dating right now.
Mm-hmm.
Anxiety comes up when we are ruminating on the past or projecting to the future.
Yes.
So either we're thinking about the last set and the ball you didn't hit, or you're thinking about where that next ball is going before you're focusing on where the racket is hitting. Just being present in the moment and focusing on like being a better listener, being more authentic in your communications, being brave and saying the tough thing so that you can get the response, even if it's not the response that you hoped for. All of those things will bring you back into the present so you can actually make contact with the ball.
Exactly.
I want to dive into this even more, but before we do, let's take a quick break to hear from our partners.
Living with ADHD can be a challenge, and dating with ADHD is definitely a challenge, we've heard many of you say. But finding the right care and proper tools needed to succeed can be life-changing. Done is an online ADHD care platform that can get you all the resources you need to help manage your ADHD. Online visits, refills, and a 24/7 care team made for you. In just 1 minute, Done's online assessment can help kickstart your ADHD treatment journey. With experienced clinicians, worry-fill refills, and online visits, you can start getting personalized care as soon as today or tomorrow. So contact an expert team that can help you around the clock and get a personalized treatment plan just for you. Here's how you do it. Take a free 1-minute assessment and book an appointment with a licensed ADHD clinician as soon as the next day. Get continuous care, one-click refills, insurance coverage, and 24/7 care team support with Done for just $79 a month, and pharmacy copays as low as $0. Visit get.donefirst.com/podcast to learn more. That's get.donefirst.com/podcast to learn more. Done. Turn ADHD into your strength.
This episode is made possible by Armoire. Armoire makes getting dressed easy. With a clothing rental membership from Armoire, build the perfect wardrobe with brands that are high quality, unique, and recommended just for you. All you have to do is take a 5-minute style quiz and select items from your dynamic, personalized closet. The styles show up at your door in as little as 2 days. Then when you're ready for new clothes, just swap them out. Listen, I live in Southern California. There is absolutely no need for puffer coats or any sort of those winter jackets. But when I travel anywhere else in the world in these cold months, I'm often burdened with the task of getting winter clothes. And now with Armoire, I can just rent my winter wardrobe. It's brilliant. Right now, our listeners can give Armoire a try and get up to 50% off their first month. That's up to $125 off. Just visit armoire.style/dateable. That is armoire.style, spelled ARMOIRE.style/DATEABLE to get up to 50% off your first month and never worry about what to wear again. Try Armoire today.
I mean, the reality too is butterflies is just anxiety. At the end of the day, like that's what it is, right?
And tequila.
It's a combination. So for you, Damona, like I know for me, I was definitely hung up on chemistry for a long time and had a similar experience to you of like, that's not what ultimately leads there. How do you think like these myths played into your own dating life? And like, how did you even overcoming them give you insight to like, okay, this is messed up. This is not the way that the happily ever after.
Ooh, I had a tough road of it. And I was not aware of any of this when I was single. Now, through working with clients over the last 17 years, I can kind of piece together all of the things that I've learned along the way. And I'm like, oh, that's why I needed a Damona back then.
Right.
But for those who are listening to this on audio that don't know, I am, yes, from Michigan, as you said at the beginning. I am Black and Jewish and 4'11" and a half. I was 5 feet, but I'm shrinking. I have curly hair. Like I do not fit into the Midwestern standard of beauty. Straight up. Everything I saw, all of the fairy tales I read, every rom-com I saw, there was no one that looked like me. So the message I got from that was like, well, this is not possible for me. And it wasn't just the message from the stories. It was the message I got from the world I was living in. And I had to realize that my authenticity, my uniqueness, the things that made me weird or made me feel other when I was younger were actually the things that when I was dating, people found interesting. People wanted to know more about. People were curious. And the more that I leaned into the reality of who I was, the authenticity of this enigma that is Damona Hoffman, that's when I was able to attract real love. So that's sort of how I've made peace with my journey as well. Even though I was not aware of the myths at the time, I was definitely walking through them. And I share a lot of those stories in the book too.
We also always hear of like people when they meet their husband. I know for me, when I met my partner, like a lot of the stuff I had on my initial list was not there. And I stopped following rules. Like, did you have any of that play in when you met your partner? Like, did you realize like all these myths were just getting in your way?
So interestingly, I had been working with a coach actually myself. I talk about this in the book. I was working with a feng shui consultant.
Oh.
People know me. Like if you watch me on the Drew Barrymore show or you listen to the podcast, you're like, she's very like strategic and methodical and whatever. There's this whole other like kind of woo-woo, esoteric, pulling from Eastern philosophy side of me that I integrate in my coaching. But I do it like really stealth so people don't know it's me. But I was working with a feng shui consultant and she had me really get clarity on what I was looking for, kind of the process I was talking about with unpacking the list. And she had me write down all of the qualities that I wanted, not the superficial qualities, but the true like identity markers of this person, their goals and their values. And I put them in what's called a helpful people box in feng shui. And I said it and I forgot it. And I was going through my life, dating, being online as one does, being out in the LA streets. And I ended up meeting somebody and I was moving into my own apartment for the first time and packing everything up. And I found my helpful people box. I opened the box and I was like, oh, it was like a time capsule. It had only been like 3 or 6 months since I did this exercise. But in it, all of those pieces of paper were not just like, oh, I could make that fit. They were like core qualities on how I would describe my husband. And I was like, this is really trippy. When you do the work, and it's like not even that much work, as you were saying earlier, when you do the work to set yourself up for success, for however you want to say it, for the universe to support you, whatever, when you clear the path, girlfriends, it's amazing how quickly things can change. And I've seen this with my clients so many times over the years where like they had one story for 5, 10, 15 years. And then just the few little tweaks that we do, 3 months later, they're like, I met someone, 6 months later, they're engaged. A year later, they're getting married. It happens so quickly when you realign in that way. So to answer your question, it wasn't really a surprise, but then there were a lot of like superficial things. Like before I did the feng shui, like when I was just out in the streets, I was like, yeah, I really need to date a guy who does yoga because I do yoga and that's really important to me. You know what? I can't date anybody with like messed up teeth. Like I just can't. I like my husband played tennis, got his front tooth knocked out like 3 times. It was a whole situation. But you know what? Today they have cosmetic dentistry.
That's all
I was able to look past.
There's ways around it.
I was able to look past the tooth and it didn't matter.
Right.
In terms of long-term compatibility.
Once you have clarity on the core values and feelings you want to be in someone's presence, all that shit doesn't matter. Like none of that matters. But it's that gaining that clarity that I think a lot of daters are missing.
Yeah.
What is it that I truly want to feel around someone? What is that relationship like from day to day to be around someone? And we hear this from a lot of our listeners too, who've found great loves, is that it's never someone that they thought they would end up with ever, but it's the best they've ever been treated, the best they've ever felt, the best they've ever presented themselves in front of someone. And it's such a different feeling. So how can people start gaining that clarity on what it is they're looking for?
Well, first they read F the Fairy Tale.
Step number 1.
You know, I really wanted to walk people through a process to be able to do this. And I give all sorts of tools to be able to access that in the book. That kind of brings us to the 4th and final myth, which is the soulmate myth. This idea that there's like one perfect person out there keeps so many of us from experiencing what is possible for us in love. Because then you're also questioning if you're with somebody and you're like, well, they're really great, but you haven't done the other work that you were just describing, to align the pillars, the goals, the values, the communication, and to build the trust, which is the fourth pillar. If you haven't done that, then you're always going to be in a state of questioning.
Yeah.
And you're like waiting for this, like, I don't know, fairy godmother to come down.
I definitely want to double down on this fairy tale myth, because I think that actually like ties into what you were saying, UA, too, of like people don't take the time to get the clarity because you kind of expect that this person's just going to pop up. They're going to show up, the one, that myth of this person that's out there for you. Or on the flip side, if you have your list, you're waiting for someone to check all the boxes or they're not the one. You said that 70% of people believe in soulmates. That was an interesting stat that you had. Could you elaborate a little more on that?
It doesn't make any more sense to me than it does to you.
I was like 70%. Damn.
70% of people believe in soulmates. I've worked with OkCupid as their official dating coach and going through the data to find like what is the story that the data of the matching questions tells us. And we asked a matching question, is a soulmate worth waiting for? 90% of respondents said yes. And that stabbed me in the heart because I was like, wait, why are we waiting?
For this imaginary person. Yeah.
Again, that just gives up all of your power, all of your agency. I just don't think it serves us. Really, the idea of soulmates, the soulmate myth, as I say in F the Fairy Tale, the soulmate myth is so deeply seated. Like I traced it back to Greek mythology and the idea that like we're these half man, half woman creatures that were split in two. And then you are supposed to be like Zeus made us then travel the earth looking for our predestined other half.
Oh, wow.
It's a story, you guys. It's a story. And it's been repeated so many times that we're like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. If you really start to unpack some Greek mythology, let me tell you, doesn't all make sense.
No, I love that. People are like, AI doesn't make sense. That's scary shit. Self-driving cars? No. But soulmates? Fuck yeah.
Right?
I'm on board.
I know. Aliens? Yes.
I want to get your take on twin flames, Damona. Not like the documentary or Twin Flames universe, but just this feeling of that there's this like other half or your mirror soul. What's your take on that?
It's so cute, isn't it? It's such a cute story.
It's so cute.
I want to believe that. I want to believe that so bad. But no. And that's the thing. Like, you're not looking to be with yourself.
Right.
You're looking for someone who complements you.
Right.
So this whole idea of twin flames, I mean, I really like do want to talk about twin flames universe. But
We'll have you back.
that's how badly we want to believe it. That there are people that will pay thousands of dollars that will be manipulated just to be told, yes, with complete certainty, this person is your twin flame. No. That robs us of all the experience that we get to have of getting to grow with somebody and of doing the exploration of a relationship. Relationships are really a mirror and they will help you grow into the best version of yourself. And that's why I love the work that I do. We should want to be on that journey. Yep. It's not, as I was saying earlier, just like, oh, congratulations, you met your twin flame, your other half. All the work is done. You got the ring. You won.
Well, someone's not going to save you. Like you can only save yourself too. And I think that's where it goes back to the fairy tale. It's like we're waiting for that other half and that person to complete us, but you already complete yourself.
The fairy tale myth is what I think is why so many modern daters are really subscribing to the fairy tales, because I think we're just having a hard time making choices. And I've had a lot of friends say an arranged marriage could be great. Just have someone else make that decision for me and say, here's the person you need to commit to. And that's kind of like the soulmate, twin flames realm too. It's like having someone else make that decision for you. What daters are missing right now is having more conviction in their decisions in dating. How can people start making more of those decisions with conviction and with confidence without getting into the whole like soulmate territory?
That's an excellent observation. And I think overall, we are just decision fatigued.
Yeah.
And we have to consider that anytime you have to make a decision, whether it's do I turn left or right? Do I respond to this text? Do I swipe left or right? That has an energetic cost. You literally burn calories with each of those decisions.
Yeah.
And we are just worn out. We have just been running our minds through all of these
Seriously.
decision gauntlets. So it's no wonder that daters are fatigued, tired, feeling, I don't know if I'd go all the way to lazy, but, feeling like they don't have the energetic capacity for what dating is today. I totally get that. And I also believe that we have more control over that than we give ourselves credit for. So if you put some scaffolding around your dating process, it's going to feel a lot less stressful and you're not going to feel so out of control. So when I say that, I mean things like actually tracking your dates. I have a date tracker for my Dates and Mates listeners where it's like literally come home from the date, write down what you're thinking, what you're feeling, your interest in seeing this person again, any details that you need to remember. And then we track that. We track also when you switch out your primary photo. Do you get more messages? Do you get higher quality messages? Are you matching with different people? We really examine that and streamline our efforts so that we're not just throwing shit against the wall and saying whatever happens, because that is exhausting. Yeah. And the other part of that is we just have to acknowledge how communication has shifted so dramatically in the last 20 years. So now we've got text and we've got DMs on the app and we've got social media DMs and we have WhatsApp and we have Slack. It's like there's a crushing amount of communication coming at us at all times.
Yeah.
So can you sort of streamline that? Maybe not be on 3 dating apps at once. I think that's the average, 3.5 apps.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe not.
It's exhausting.
Maybe not have notifications on so that you can protect your energy.
Yeah. There's this part of your book title that I just love of the live your own love story, which I think ultimately that's what you're saying. After the fairy tale, live your own love story. And I know personally for me, when I stopped playing all the rules and the games and basically what you were saying, got rid of the list, all of it, that's when I met my partner. And honestly, it's far exceeded what I thought could actually be the love that I wanted. What I was going for, this fairy tale, it actually ended up being better than that because it was real and authentic. How has this played in your own life, or how have you seen clients also end up saying F the fairy tale and actually having a better love life?
I have lived that story. I have seen it happen for so many clients. I do a group program. It's funny because when we're in the thick of it, we're doing so much rewiring and changing behaviors and actions. Sometimes it's hard for people to really be able to see the progress. And now that we're wrapped, I'm starting to get all of the messages from people that have been through it that are like, I threw away the list and now I have more dates than I ever had before. I threw away the list and I'm dating this person.
Yeah.
And now I'm in a phase of dating that I never have experienced, or this feels completely different. And it's really exciting for me to get that feedback and know that this is not theoretical. This is a method I have developed from doing this for 17 years.
Right.
And seeing that there are patterns to human behavior. And there are some things that are changing, like the technology, the way we communicate, but there are some things that are hardwired that are never going to change. And our desire to be loved and to also love another person, to partner up, to have our sexual needs met, to form community or families, that's not going to go away. And it's still here. And so I love hearing your story. And I hope people are also inspired by my story and knowing that it can literally be better than you imagined if you let go of what the story was originally on the page.
That's exactly it. The fairy tale is yours. It's not someone else's. So how do you make it your own? So with that, if you had to redefine a modern day fairy tale, what would that be now?
Okay. My least favorite of the fairy tales, and I have 2 kids, so I've been reliving all the fairy tales again. And it's the worst of the worst, y'all, is The Little Mermaid.
That one's so bad.
It is the worst. Yeah. And I loved it as a kid. And now I'm like, what? You're supposed to not speak. You lose your identity, leave your family and everything you know and love behind.
So bad.
And then you can be loved by this a-hole. Right. I mean, how about he learns how to breathe underwater, okay?
You grow some fins.
Grow some fins, man. I want to know what fairy tales you'd rewrite.
I mean, every single one of them, I feel like.
All of them. All of them have been about waiting.
Yes.
Just waiting. Sleeping Beauty
Rapunzel
is legitimately the definition of waiting.
Yeah.
She just slept.
Her only existence is about finding a man. Just wait.
She was just resting, basically dead until A man made her alive.
Oh.
That is the saddest story I've ever heard in my life.
True.
I also feel like Beauty and the Beast, like on the surface, it's a nice message. Like, don't care about what someone looks like.
Yeah.
But he's an asshole. Like, this guy is borderline abusive. Like, he is,
And bipolar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, this is not okay. Doesn't matter if they're not quote unquote attractive. You don't give them a chance if they're an asshole. I think this all comes back to like a takeaway I have too. It's like we have been fed these stories and they're stories for a reason, right? What we're proposing is like the modern day fairy tale. It's like be good with yourself and, you know, have an equal partnership. Like that's boring. That's not seen as like the movie or the rom-com or the exciting tale. But at the end of the day, your life doesn't need to be like that because that's not realistic. All that's giving you is anxiety and not leading you to the actual fairy tale, which is having a loving partnership. So I love the example you gave, Damona, about like Greek mythology, like how it goes that far back. Like we need to really question where this stuff is coming from. And we love this concept. We call it, it's similar to, I think, what you were saying with the end of Live Your Own Love Story. We call it like DIY your relationship. Like find what works for you. Design the love life that is best for you. Like it doesn't have to be what worked for your parents or your best friend or whoever. At the end of the day, this is your life and we don't need to be adapting to these outdated myths and fairy tales that probably aren't going to make us happy in the long run. So I think the ultimate happily ever after is being true to yourself and finding a partner that complements you.
And remember that you also can bring the excitement at any time. Like,
yes,
I like to plan things in the future with my spouse. That's how I keep the excitement. Like I already know we're going on a trip February 17th. I put that on the calendar so that we can build anticipation and excitement. Or I'll, plan little fun things at home or little surprises. And that's the thing that continues the story. Because that's the thing is when you get the ring or, whatever the quote end goal is, the story doesn't end. You have to keep writing it.
Yeah.
but that's also healthy excitement. That's not like waiting by your phone and determining if someone likes you or not, like things that are eating at your self-esteem and causing you anxiety. So it's up to us to also recognize like what is good excitement versus detrimental excitement.
Yeah. A big takeaway I have is thinking about fairy tales as not the only way. And I think that's the detriment of a fairy tale is that this is the only way your story can end. When we're just talking about the Disney fairy tales, let's think about the alternative. What could have happened to Ariel if she stayed under the sea and maybe found someone much better? What would have happened to Sleeping Beauty if she lived her damn best life and was a CEO of a big corporation and, was able to have a much grander life? Same with our own fairy tales. What is the alternative? And I think once we wake up from the fairy tale, it's hard to unsee it.
Mm-hmm.
You start to have a different filter for everything you see. I mean, now when we watch Sex and the City, we totally see Mr. Big in a different light.
Yeah.
Because you have a different filter, right?
That guy,
That guy
I
needed
was
to die.
Never. I was like, what is the big deal?
You know what, though?
You got
You
what
were
was
more
coming to an end.
enlightened because I feel like I got
You were.
swept up in their chemistry and their banter and all the things you
Yes.
think. It's like what you were saying, like what we focus on, the
Fate.
chemistry. Yep.
Once you see that, you can't unsee it. So let's start exercising this idea of placing a different filter on our lives.
Yes.
What's the alternative to that story?
Yeah.
So I appreciate that you have a whole book dedicated to editing out your filter and seeing the world in a different way and creating a love life that could be much grander than you ever imagined. So really, thank you for bringing that into the world at a time when we really need it.
Thank you. I feel seen and heard. You get it.
We get it. We're on the same page as you, Damona. F the fairy tale. For anyone that wants to get the book, we read it. It's incredible. It's such a good framework and just way to like put all this into perspective, into practice. So it's not a one and done thing. Where can people find the book?
Well, it's anywhere books are sold in hardcover, audiobook, and ebook. You can find out more at fthefairytalebook.com. Also, I do the Dates and Mates podcast every Tuesday. So that was like my lab for the book where I test out a lot of the theories and where I get questions from listeners on what's really happening in their dating lives too.
Awesome. And Yue and I will be on Dates and Mates soon. We're very excited about it. And we'll make sure to also link all that in the show notes.
Can't wait. Thank you.
Fabulous. And thank you to our listeners for coming along for the ride. If you enjoy this episode, which we know you did, give us a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. And in the body of your review, maybe write something about a fairy tale that you no longer believe in, or just simply write F the fairy tale. And we know you listened to this episode. 5 stars goes a long way for us. And while you're there, check out Dates and Mates too. 5 stars there. Let's spread the love.
Yes, it is.
That's a fairy tale to be spreading. Okay, on that, we're going to wrap up this episode.
Stay dateable.
The Dateable Podcast is part of the Frolic Media Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts. You can follow us on Instagram at Dateable Podcast and visit dateablepodcast.com for access to all the episodes and our premium programs. Also, make sure to subscribe today if you haven't already on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform, so you are the first to get all the latest episodes. And most importantly, stay dateable.